Tem tema do mês? No? Okay. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Good. Good to see all of you here. The autumn is here with us too, so it's nice to see everybody wearing nice and warm clothes. But TSS and the lecture is gonna make us feel even warmer in our hearts and in our spirits. So we welcome everybody who is coming here. I'm not sure if there is anyone that is coming for the first time. Oh, welcome. And what we do, we're just gonna do our initial prayer, and after that we're gonna have our lecture that today is gonna be done by Marco Magalhaes, and he will be talking about Professor Rivail, which was Allan Kardec before Kardec. So Allan Kardec before Spiritism. And the theme of this month is about the Spirit's book, which is an amazing book for those who never had a chance to read from the introduction, which is the amazing part of the book, throughout all the questions that we have. Really, really recommend to all of you. So welcome all, and our initial reading is going to be done by our dear friend, and she's going to be doing from the book Happy Life.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
As said, the initial reading is from the book Happy Life by Rivail de Pereira Franco and Joana de Angelis. Never lose hope. Whatever may happen, keep believing. If everything is against you and failure threatens you with despair, even then expect divine assistance. Only what is best for us happens. The law of God is the law of love, and love can do everything, and does to do everything. When you think that help will not arrive in time, if you continue hoping, you will happily discover that it reached you minutes before the disaster. The person who despairs has already lost part of the battle that he was going to fight, and goes forward at a disadvantage.
Okay, so let's bow our heads, elevate our thoughts to God, our Creator, to Jesus, our Master of Love, our guiding love, and to all the spirits present here today, the incarnate and discarnate ones. It is with happiness and gratitude in our hearts that we are gathered here today to welcome His words and His teachings in our hearts and in our minds. And we ask God to illuminate Marco Magalhaes' minds today, as well as our own, so we can accept his teachings and learn from them, but above all, and act on them. So be with us. So be it. Marco.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about Professor Kardec's name when he was born, Professor Rivail, and then Professor Rivail, and then we're going to be talking a little bit about his life before starting his work in what we call today Spiritism. Mind you that at that time the word Spiritism didn't even exist. So we're going to go through some of the interesting aspects of his life before he took on this mission, and a little bit of what happened during and after that. I'll try not to go into too much detail on certain key steps of that period, We had several lectures about it before, so that's not the goal. But the goal is I want to have a little snapshot, a little picture of who he was and what represented for him taking on this mission at that time and period. And some of the facts that people might not know, but bring him very close to us, because very often we refer to Spiritism, and in many places like Brazil, for example, you hear the term Kardecists, right? We're Kardecists, and it's interesting because he himself tried us in every single step of the way to step away from titles. Now we actually call everything he's done a Kardecist theory, which is, again, completely against what he did in his entire life, which is present himself as a regular guy that decided to take one of the most amazing missions in history, in our recent history, of bringing on this collective amount of information that we call Spiritism today. Now, so I would like to start like this. So, in today's society, if you have kids and you have family, or you're bringing up a family together in this country or in this planet today, what would it mean to be successful for us today? Having a job, right? We all want that. Getting a salary or getting some nice money or paycheck at the end of the month, right? So we can afford a good house, right? If you're in Canada, probably will be a detached, right, with some lawn and 2-car garage, maybe, I don't know. In other places will be just a place where you can actually lock the door and sleep inside. But anyways, independent on where you are in the universe, you have some set goals that is considered to be the norm of being successful, right? Go to school, university, get a family, get a nice detached house, have 2 kids, have 2 cars, and that's what you consider to be successful in many cases. And I would revert that question now. Now imagine that you had all that, and then all of a sudden your partner tells you that instead of continue this meteoric career as a professor and writing books, and he'll decide to actually study something that most people thought would be completely nuts, which is tables talking. Okay? Now, put all that together and try to picture this man. Okay? Try to picture a man that with 18-year-old man that writes his first book about teaching methods, right? And instead of the big dreams of someone who wants to be famous and successful, what he did is he taught a numerous amount of people for free that otherwise wouldn't be able to do it. That's what he did. And this is the same man that, with an incredible career as a professor, decides to take on a mission of understanding what was happening when those tables started talking to people. Where most would go into that to have fun, right? To see something different, right? And exciting, right? He was there to take on a mission that we're just starting to understand. Actually, we don't understand at all. Now, think about the family. Think about his spouse. So we're going to talk about her in a minute. That took on the mission with him and supported him all the way through. The dedication of writing countless hours, material that most people thought was completely out of this world. Having your career completely discredited by the fact that you decided to write something that was not scientifically accepted. Now, can you guys relate to this man? This is Allan Kardec. He's not a superstar. He's not a saint in the terms that we call saint, right? He is a man with an incredibly bright spirit that took on one of the most incredible journeys in his lifetime, and that's what we're going to try to summarize for you. So, regarding his early life, he was born as a Catholic family, so he had all the knowledge about the Gospels, at least through the optics of the Catholic Church at that time, right? See, he went to, even as a young age, he was already actively engaged in Christianity, bringing together people, talking about the understanding of the ideas of Jesus Christ. And this is even way before we know him as this single one picture that we have of him, right? This is a very different man. At age 10, he moved to Switzerland to study with Pestalozzi. And of course, nothing in the universe happens by chance. So we're talking about a momentum in history where things are put in place by the spirituality to accommodate a change. So the fact that, obviously, at that time, Hippolyte Léon Denisard Rivail, that's his name, went to study with Pestalozzi, which was another incredible educator at that time, also tells us a lot. Because that was he needed at that point to understand, for example, concepts of how do you educate kids, how do you talk about moral evolution, moral development in kids. That was what Pestalozzi was doing, right? And so you guys understand the Yverdon Institute. That's where Pestalozzi was teaching. It created a completely new understanding of teaching. A lot of what we do today is based on what Pestalozzi introduced at that time in the 1800s. I'll give you an example. Kids, for example, learning by experiencing things. For example, you do a lab. Have you ever thought about studying labs? Actually, you do things with your hand, and you actually put things together, and you feel it, and you go outside, and you have biology classes that are done in a zoo. That never happened before. The idea that people need to experience learning is actually something that started in the 1800s, and Pestalozzi was one of the many drivers of that change. For example, the new philosophy that tests and marks are not necessarily the best tool we have to address the development of a kid, which is something completely novel, right? No. Pestalozzi did it in the 1800s. That's exactly what he believed. And now we're starting to understand that. Instead of testing the ability of someone to memorize a sequence of coordinates and data, which is a test does, you have to memorize specific topics. Pestalozzi introduced individualized approach to measure development, and that's what we incorporated today in most of our schools. We still have tests, obviously, but we have several other ways of doing the same thing. Now, another thing that Pestalozzi did, which is also quite remarkable, was that he did charge tuition for certain kids that were able to pay, but he also accepted numerous kids that were not able to pay any tuition, and they were all trained exactly the same way. That's exactly what he believed on, and he helped. So when Kardec went into this particular mode of training, so he was exposed to a lot of these new ideas of education and development of kids and how to teach and how to train kids. So Pestalozzi, for example, one of the very, very important quotes for him is that the capacity of a child should only be measured by their own individual merits, and the new concepts of no judging, no criticizing, those are the things that he introduced. So Kardec is exposed to this completely new reality of learning. And what do we see in the Spirit's book? That's exactly the methodology that we see developing in the Spirit's book. an inquiry pattern of approach. So you ask questions, you get the answers. We should learn from those question and answers, right? We don't have this old style of breaking down information from top to bottom, where we can only have access to information as far as the next person above us is able to digest that information for us. That does not happen in Spiritism. And the reason why that does not happen, because Kardec had this opportunity of learning from someone that did not believe in that. Right? He believed in the access information to all, and each one has its own pace of learning. Now, if we read the Spirit's book and we don't understand zip the first time, is that a bad thing? So you're out of Spiritism, right? Right? Isn't that crazy to say something like that? But in many other areas of science, that's exactly what happens, right? Oh, you're not good at math? Don't ever try engineering because you're going to be out of school. It's going to be a disaster. So we tailor people based on their inability or their how fast they learn, how slow they learn things, which doesn't make any sense. I'm a pathologist. I hated pathology when I was younger. Does that make me a bad pathologist? No. Right? I had my own pace. It took me 24 years to learn that I liked pathology. That's fine. Right? So that's exactly what Spiritism focuses on. That's exactly because of Pestalozzi workings on this, right? So you should take Spiritism as a way, as a tool, as a means for you to learn and be a better person. It doesn't matter if you disagree with something, you agree with that, or if you learn this or you don't learn that, or you take 100 years or 5 incarnations to learn what is God. Remember, it took us about 20,000 years on earth to have answer to a question, is what is God? And we still don't understand that. Right? Does that make us bad? No. Right? Good? No. It doesn't matter. Right? So a lot of the philosophy of what we teach today comes deeply embedded on this new idea of education that was brought at that time. Okay? For example, one of the most important quotes from Pestalozzi is that love is the foundation of our nature to be human, to humanity. So what is the foundation of Spiritism? See how the information is shared? So we talk about charity as an act of love towards other people, and charity as the foundation of development as a human. So charity is love in action. That's the translation in what we understand as charity and love. So that is the foundation. So love is the foundation. Now, almost every single religion in the universe thinks the same way, right? And Pestalozzi introduced that to his teaching methods. And now we learn from someone who actually also endorsed those same things. And that's why in Spiritism, no one will ever be judged by how you approach a book or how you read it or how you take it or how you question it. We are allowed to question, no doubt. Do you know how Kardec learned? He wrote in the posthumous works. He wrote a very interesting paragraph in the chapter 2, the second part of the book. He says, I took every single opportunity, and posthumous works is interesting because he talks as Kardec, really. He talks about himself, which is something you do not find in the 5 Basics book, exactly because those books have a completely different audience, right? They're designed to, spread a particular type of understanding. Now, in the posthumous work is actually a lot of how he took certain situations, and he writes, I took every single opportunity to write the most complex and challenging and picky questions to every spirit. He was challenging them. We should do the same. No problem. Take the information back, think about it, rationalize it, solidify it inside of you. That's how Kardec did. He was not playing with the spirit, say, let's have fun. He was, talk about this question and that. No, he was trying in every single moment to extract information that he was able to prove and validate with other spirits and at any other time. So the inquisitive mind is what makes us human. Think about it. If you just, in the world of fake news, this is really important. Fake news is not new. Fake news is part of humanity. It's always been. Just the term that we're using now, it's like cool, right? But the reality is that misinformation is part of how humanity grew since the very, very early stages of humanity, because that's a lot of who we are, right? So misinformation is a very important tool that you obviously have been used negatively, obviously, for so many years and for ages, right? Don't you think that misinformation happened during the 1800s? Of course it did, right? Now, the difference now, obviously, we have a lot of access to information that was a little bit more challenging at the beginning, because remember, in the beginning, information was verbal and directly between people to people. So I would take a little notes that I had, and I'll travel to another city, and I'll talk to people about those notes, and that's how Christianity started, right? Don't you think that at some point there were contradicting information being spread out about Christianity? Of course there was. And that was weeded out by the inquisitive nature of trying to find the truth. Now we're in what people are calling the post-truth area, where even if I tell you the truth, it doesn't matter anymore, because whatever aligns to your own mediocre capability of understanding the reality is whatever is true for you. And that's why people are starting to polarize themselves, right? Because truth is somehow not that important anymore. But that whole concept of understanding what's true and is not true is actually what drives us to understand who we are and how can we do better, right? And Kardec, when he was questioning the spirits, he was doing the same thing. He had an open mind, but he obviously asked all the challenging questions. And he asked questions he knew the answers sometimes, just to make sure he was getting the right answers. But of course, the spirits that were talking to him, at some point, they changed. They started as spirits that were not significantly different from any one of us, so they didn't have answers to a lot of things, right? So they would just make up stuff and, have fun with things. And then at some point, those spirits changed, because then when things started to get really serious, obviously serious spirits came to help. And that's when most of the information came out of it. And that's what we know as Spiritism. Okay? Now, let's talk about what he did then. So in 1823, he writes his first book. It's called Practical and Theoretical Course on Math, based on Pestalozzi methods. I don't know about you guys, but when I was 18, I could barely write a paragraph. Unless it's like university entrance exams that I had to write 2 pages or something, but other than that, I wouldn't write anything. By the age of 20-something, he was already teaching physics, mathematics, astronomy, philosophy, and chemistry. In 1828, so he was actually 24, he opened his first educational institute to help people who could not get access to education. See, this is a different time in the universe, eh? We're not talking about universal schools to everyone, no. Okay? So we're talking about a lot of people that did not have access to information or to schools, right? So that's when he opened his first educational institute, which the very first time it was actually in his own place. He would actually bring people into his own house to teach them for free. Okay? Now, going back to the idea of success that we talked about in the beginning, right? Someone brought up in his family with his training and his capability. Yes, he could be like a Nobel laureate today of something topics, but he chose a different path. And this changing of path is the most important mark of those spirits that come to do a major differential role in humanity. And you can talk about Mother Teresa, you can talk about Martin Luther King, and so many others that came, they've deviated from the path of least resistance. Right? That is the question for us. how often we have opportunities to deviate from the easiest path and take the challenging one, and we don't do it. I can tell you about I did it 100 million times, and I know about every one of those. I know every single time that I had an opportunity of doing something I didn't. It doesn't mean that I'm a bad person, because I'm trying. I do one thing here and one thing there. I'm learning a little bit. I'm trying to get better, like every one of us, right? But it has to go back into each one of us and think about how can we make a difference, considering what we have available, our resources, our opportunities, right? Obviously, changing ourselves is a big deal, and if we all do that at the same time, hey, we will speed up the process of evolution quite quickly, right? We don't have to go one little step at a time. Maybe we can jump 2-3 steps, but we tend not to do it, right? But that's the idea. In 1832, he married Émilie Gabrielle Baudet. So Emily was also a teacher, literature and arts. See, it's coincidence, right? So he used to teach free courses from 1835 to 1850, right? And she was one of the most important individuals, not in the circle of Kardec, that actually supported every step of the way, including times they had no money to pay their own bills. That happened. They were in trouble. They were teaching free courses and writing things that no one wants to read. Right? That's not an easy life, I'll tell you that. Okay? Living in a industrial revolution era, right? So we're 1850s. Remember that. That's when what we understand as industries and production and markets, everything that we understand today kind of flipped around that time, right? That was the 1850s. So they're right in that time doing this, okay? She comes from a very wealthy family, though, which is interesting, but she was always supportive and humble and understanding of this mission, right? That was the idea that behind Kardec, and she even she even contributed financially to some of those Now think about so try to write a book today. So I'm gonna write a book about, you can choose. Okay, let's try something that no one believes or understands. Okay, let's start with that. So I'm gonna write a book about something no one believes, no one understands, and I'm gonna sell it. Who's gonna buy it? How are you gonna make money of this? Right? Isn't it the success definition of us? Make money, have a good life, buy a nice car, and and sell 1 million books, be in the top charts of the New York Times Review, right? Everything here is counterintuitive, right? And that's when I wanted to depict this man, which devoted his entire life to something that most people would completely say, you're completely crazy, just stop this, right? Just think about this, right? I think this happened close to you guys sometimes. Okay. So we can keep going now, and and I'm not going to go through details through how he wrote all the books, because I think it's, there's a lot out there. We have more opportunities to talk about that. So I'm going to focus on the individual, okay? So he, after, obviously struggling, particularly in the beginning, in the first book, when he was writing the Spirit's book, and after years and years of reviewing thousands of communications from all over the world, right? He puts this together, and now we're thinking that, okay, he's done this amazing job, everything will be great. No. There's an episode in 1855 that he was his spirit guide. This is amazing to me, because it shows a lot of the challenges of doing this. So in 1855, he's at home, and then he started to hear this bangs on walls, right? Scary, right? So he was banging the walls and banging, and then he was walking. This is from the posthumous work, okay? So he was going to check, and then when he was getting close to the wall that divided his house with his neighbor, the banging stopped, right? And then he went back, and then it started again, and then he checked, it disappeared, and then that cycle stayed until midnight when he went to bed. He went to bed, and then the banging stopped. Okay? So the next day, he went to one of the meetings that he used to participate almost on a daily basis, to have communications with spirits. Not being a medium of extensive communication himself, he's always present in meetings where you have, or the seances or meetings that you have mediums that were able to communicate directly with the spirit. So in the next meeting, he asks the spirit communicating, like, what was that happened yesterday? Like, there's this banging on my walls. And this is the man that's writing Spiritism, right? So think about this. And then they say, that was their familiar spirit. And then he asks why he was banging on the wall. And then, well, he wanted to talk to you. Okay, so what he wanted to say? Well, he's here, ask him. Okay, so he does ask the spirit. So why you're banging on my wall till midnight? He said, you made a mistake. Look at chapter number 30 of a book you're writing. That's a mistake there, and I'll leave it up to you to figure it out. And they're gonna take it easy on him, right? So and then he realized he was writing something. Then it's like, cool, but I'm about to send it out to other people to review. It's like, don't do it. Don't send unfinished work to review. You open yourself to a lot of trouble. It's like, what I'm gonna do then is like, go back and redo your work. Then he did, and sure enough, there was, and he describes it in post. There's a major, significant mistake in 2 sections of the book that he was just writing. Okay. And then he corrects it, and then he tells the spirit again, oh, wait a minute, I've corrected. It's like, not good enough. Not good enough. I know you. And Kardec even said, I actually destroyed the first manuscript. And then I said, good for you. Do it again. Okay, go back and redo it. And then we're thinking, life is hard, right? So we're already going through this entire life. And think about other individuals in the same journey. Think about Chico Xavier, for example, right? When we think, life will be easy, right? So all you have to do is dedicate your life for this amazing work and everything will be great. And no, everything is a challenge, right? And we have to make the decisions. So he goes back, and then the spirits, and like when he returns, the spirit says it's better, but it still has room for improvement. That's what his guide spirit said. And this is nothing more or less than the spirit of truth. And he introduced himself, I am the truth. And then he asks, like, why are you calling yourself the truth? Is that because you're the truth that I want to know? It's like, it doesn't matter. Like, you can think about it that way. The important thing is that I am the truth. Now, one warning here, please. If you're trying to spend a lot of time trying to figure out who the Spiritist truth was or is, don't do it. It's a completely useless exercise. Because the reason why he didn't want to say his name is exactly because we don't need to know that. We need to know what he said. And if you disagree, great. Just try to figure out what's wrong. I don't think you're going to be able to do it. But what he said is the message. And he didn't want to put his name ahead of his message. That's exactly what Kardec did. He even changed his own name. So he would not be the face post of Time magazine selling a book about this new theory. The theory itself, or the Spiritism, collective information Spiritism that we know today, is actually the truth. That's the message, not himself. He excused himself from that, right? Same thing that the Spiritist truth did. And I know a lot of people, if you go even now in this incredible new era of technology that we talk to each other and we connect and iPad and text everyone, you find thousands of people doing these massive essays about who was this and who was that and who did this. Kardec himself wrote in the Spirit's book, and then in the Gospel to Spiritism, and then in the Medium's books. Like, please don't do this. Use that energy to something that really is going to make a difference. Stop trying to figure out who you were before, who you're going to be in the past, or who this guy. It doesn't make any difference, right? If it really made a difference, they would tell you, like St. Augustine did, and he signed all the messages. Because St. Augustine wanted to do that, and because that was important for us. And that's another topic, another lecture, but we'll talk about that at some point. Right? Why was it so important for some particular spirits to write the message and sign it, and for others, it doesn't, right? But Kardec also, interestingly enough, when he describes also in the posthumous work, when he first got in contact with what we know as Spiritism today, right? So he met Mr. Fortier, which was he studied magnetism and animal magnetism, and he was the first person that approached Professor Rivail at that time and said, I've been finding something quite interesting. I've been going to meetings where people can magnetize. They used that word at that time. Remember, because we didn't know anything about this, right? Magnetize objects, and the objects would move, right? And Kardec at that time, said, okay, fine. It's totally possible that things can happen that we don't understand. For example, at that time, the new technology was not cell phones, right? So it was like telegraphs. Can you imagine? And he writes in the book, 1850s, right? Around 1850. He writes the book. Can you imagine sending a message to about 500 miles away without any technology? It's like you send the message, and the message is received in another machine that can translate into actually a real message. That was the incredible technology at the time, right? Now, the way he saw it, though, is like, if I can do that, if I can send a message through some type of media 500 miles away and I get it the other side, why is it not possible from another conscience to send me a message from somewhere in the universe and I receive it here through whichever means I have, in this case as a medium? That's how the inquisitive aspect of his mind worked. Like, he was able to make those connections where most people did not, right? So he never questioned it. But he was intrigued by it. He wanted to know more. So in 1855 was his first visit to Mise Pleine Maison, which is a very, very important part of pretty much all the books in Spiritism. And it was, and he writes it quite clearly. He puts the date and time. So it was a Tuesday, 8 p.m. It's a coincidence. It's the same time of our mediumistic meeting here. So, and he starts. He describes what he calls his experimental approach, right? I guess if you guys remember, when he's 18, what was the first book he wrote? Methods to Study Math. So he knew all about methods, I can tell you. Because I told you already, I don't think many of us would write a book in 18 about methods in science, right? So he really knew how to approach this. So is it a coincidence? No. He obviously prepared himself as a spirit for thousands and thousands of years to be in this place, in this role, at this time, like all of us do. Okay? The difference is that he took it, right? And then we can go back to the medium's book, talk about the failed mediums and, the missions and and the Ministry of Education of the spiritual world, where we go there every day and study. We're gonna go back. We're gonna do this. We're gonna be great, right? Until we get here, and we're trained that being great means something completely different. Being great means receiving 20,000 likes in a day in Facebook. That's great. So we are, since babies, trained to unlearn everything that we've just learned in the spiritual world. That is a challenge. Oh yes, it is. It's up to us to figure that out. We have to. I'm not against social medias, by the way. Not at all. I'm just saying that there is a philosophical aspect about who we are in the universe and what we do. And that is the core of humanity and who we are in humanity. And there is a place that you have to figure out what exactly you need to do. It doesn't matter what it is. And that's what Kardec figured out very early, right? And that's why he's so important to us. Not because of what he wrote, but also who he was. And his experimental method was actually quite straightforward. He would actually first start with questions that he knew the answer, right? But what he quickly realized is that even before he asked the questions, they have already answered, because they were able to read his thoughts. That was quite something. So he was receiving intelligent answers, even before he was able to ask them. So that was the first thing. And then he realized also that a lot of the information, so next step obviously is like he wants to rule out that someone in there knew the answers, was just like cheating and sending the answer away. So he started asking things that no one in there could possibly know the answer. And again, he got all the answers. And then that's when the seriousness of the work started to be revealed, and the jokes about, what am I hiding in my hand? Tell me. It's like, that's when that type of question disappeared, because that's what people used to do. It was a show. Don't we have TV shows about, mystical things and people that can do this, and telepaths, and they can put people to sleep, and they can tell you your age, right? So that is like a modern version of a seance, right? There's like popular TV shows in that now. Okay, you can do it. The mysteries. People go into a house and put infrared cameras to detect the spirit moving around and banging on walls, right? You can find that, right? And the heart racing is like, oh my God, I see something. Which is, yeah, well, there's spirits everywhere. You don't need to go to that house to figure it out. They're actually right beside you all the time, right? But Kardec at that time was able to tease apart those completely contradicting universes, right? And then he asked, when he first contacted his protector spirit was 1855. Now, and he writes the date to December 11th, 1855. He has very good notes of everything. That tells you why he was able to write 5 books in 10 years, right, approximately. Okay? Now, think about this. So, this is a man that we talked about the decisions he had to make during this, his development, basically as a human. And now we're looking at an aspect of Kardec that is completely ignored by many people in Spiritism. And that is, yes, he was just like any one of us. He had a spirit guide. He had a protector spirit, right? Protector spirit actually helped him. His mother came to visit him as a spirit, but he couldn't see her, just like we can't do the same. Most of us, at least, right? But he was kind of thinking about his mother, and then he asked, is my mother coming to visit me? And the spirit, yes, she comes whenever she can, and she do whatever she can to help you, right? And she's around you. This is the type of question that all of us have. Isn't that true? That's true, right? And he even asked, for example, look at this man. So he asked his protector spirit, with my intelligence, with my own defects, basically. That's what he's asking. Am I going to be able to dive through this incredible amount of knowledge that you're giving to me? He was afraid. He was obviously afraid that he was so intelligent in a way that he understood his limits, his limitations. Right? What he can potentially do and not. And he asked the spirit, like, am I going to be able to do this? Because sometimes I feel that I'm actually not being able to do this appropriately. Right? And then the spirit says, yes, you are. Because, and he writes here, because true faith is the driver. True faith. Right? Because if you have true faith, you believe in everything we just talked about. You're going to understand the law of love. You understand that you're going to be helped. Right? You understand there will be challenges, but challenges can be overcome. Right? He even goes and asks them, another thing that he asks is that, if this is a time at financially speaking, things were not doing well, right? Because again, we talked about this, how difficult is this entire taking that he decided to go through, and then he even asked, like, are you to protect your spirit? Are you helping me materially? Right? Are you going to do that? Are you going to help me materially too? Actually, the spirit answers, of course. Because if we don't help you provide what you need to survive, I don't love you. Like, this means like, I'm telling you to do this, And I'll make everything harder for you to do that? Of course not. I'll do everything I can to support you. Right? Which is the message to us. Because if you go back now and think about our own society today, what are we training our kids as a measure of success? 90% of it is material or irrelevant to measure success. And independently of kids decide to do and what they want to do with their lives and their careers and their families when they decide to go, the driving force is the true faith. That's exactly what they told Kardec. That's going to drive them to make the decisions that are important for them, right? And also understanding that material things will be provided accordingly. It may be very different from what we expect, right? And I think expectations and reality, it's a big clash for everything, right? But understanding that, this movements towards goodness and development and love and evolving, all those will be met with a lot of challenges because we are in a world which is still dominated by the dissonant aspects of love, which is almost like the lack of it in many cases. So obviously, and physics explained this, right? So every time you impede, you have a force against a particular object, another force equivalent to that will just reply to you, and that same principle is valid for any aspect of life. Not even physics talks about emotions and talks about who you are and actions and action and reaction, how you do things. So every action in a positive way in a world that's dominated by the lack of it will be met with a forceful pushback. Okay? And that's why, for example, for individuals like Martin Luther King, we're still talking about it today, of what he's done, the forces that were generated that transformed the world we live in today. But again, the forces against it that still survived. Because what he's done is not over. The chances of our whole society collapse back to an earlier stage of development is actually quite possible. Because we're still in those type of baby steps that you can go a little step up and you can tumble one down. We're still there. Collectively, we're going in an upward trend towards evolution. But remember, little bounces in evolution are quite common. So we have to be always aware of it. Getting rid of those sentiments, those negative feelings of hatred, of prejudice, of anger, all those things that can drive us collectively back to a stage that we were before, right? And move forward. Those are very important things, right? And that's a lot of what the protective spirit of Allan Kardec was telling him all the time. It's we'll provide you. Work hard, oh, you wrote a chapter. Great. It doesn't look good. Do it again, right? And we're here thinking, he was just 100 million spirits around him and he was doing great. No. He was challenging everything from every day in his life and to write this. And remember, he even had the possibility of getting his books all burned down because they were against the collective theory of the Catholic Church. So there's so many things happening in the world at this time, right? And it's a very challenging time, very, very challenging time. Okay. And then in 1856, his mission is revealed. That's in one of those meetings that he had with a selected number of mediums that. He's the spirit Z, they call it that time, which was his protective spirit, comes in and say, Kardec, your mission is now revealed, and you know what it is, right? Your mission is to apply everything you've learned throughout so many ages of incarnations and studying to bring to light the information that we already know. We already know. Nothing in Spiritism detracts from what we knew about Christianity. Nothing. It is just bringing to light using a new tool, and that's what he says, a new means. The spirits communicating, they're not the revelation themselves. So Spiritism is not about talking about spirits. No. We know about the influence in spirits since the Egyptians were writing about it, and the Chinese and the Hindus were writing about it, and we know about it. And in Judaism, there's an entire book that talks about it. And if every single aspect of humanity, we knew about it. So talking with spirits has nothing to do with Spiritism. The core of it, it was the means, and we should take it as a tool to continue using it. That's what we do in the Spiritist Center. But the revelation of the mission was to get that information and make our own changes. Right? And that's what the real mission was at that time. And what a mission. What a mission. And we're still now, obviously not all of us had access to all the information he wrote. And even for me, I've been reading about Spiritism for so many years. The posthumous works of Allan Kardec, I just recently finished reading, which is a couple of years ago. And it's a phenomenal amount of information because it brings a little window into who he was. The challenges, the situations he was able to live in, and the encounters with spiritists that did not make in through the books, and a lot of these perspectives that are so interesting for us understanding what we're doing today, right? So I'm going to leave you with a message from Pestalozzi, which I think is one of the mentors that we had in this entire journey that we went through. And this is what Pestalozzi says. Only by actually thinking, the power of thought is developed. This is very important, particularly what we're going through now, that we're not actually thinking that much, right? We receive a WhatsApp forwarded message like, look what happened. We don't even bother to think whether that's real or not. We're not thinking. We're not going to post thinking era, right? We don't, right? We just take it, we make conclusions, and we attack everyone. I just received this. Politics are going on in Brazil. Don't even think about it. I'm even out of my Facebook thingies. Politics in the United States, completely out of this world. Europe, Hungary, Italy, Spain. Right? Everywhere. We're going through a period of transformation, for sure. And what is our responsibility to think? Okay? So Pestalozzi said that very well. Only by actually thinking you develop the power of the thought. Otherwise, how are you going to develop it? If you want to make your muscles grow, what do? You go to the gym, you carry 20 pounds a million times, right? You get muscle. You don't use it, what happens? Well, the thinking is about the same. Okay? It's an exercise. We have to do it, right? And only by actually imagining, the powers of imagination get developed. These are for kids too, for us, for adults, right? The same applies to the powers of art. Only by using it does the hand become skilled. Okay? Only by strenuous effort does the body get stronger. And finally, the same applies to moral powers. Love only develops by the act of loving. So if you don't love, how are you going to develop the love that's sitting inside of you? You cannot. How many times you heard this? Right? So, and then he says, by the act of loving, and not by talking about love. That's what, we do that, right? Religious faith only develops by believing, not by talking about faith, nor by the knowledge and learning by heart of things believed by others. And this last line here is exactly what Kardec embedded it into his own soul when he was writing about Spiritism. It was developed. He coined the term Spiritism. Because, imagine if he was not thinking and not really listening to any. All he was doing is like listen to, for example, one of the very well-known people at that time that would tell him, "Oh yeah, the tables are moving. It's just magnetism. Don't worry about it. Like they're gonna bang in the walls and stuff, and that's it." If he only believed in that, with other people were believing, and moved away, we wouldn't even be here today. That was that little decision that made this possible. So he was not talking about stuff. He was actually using it. He was thinking. He was developing things. And I think that is thinking about Kardec before and after Spiritism, and now today us, if there was one message that would probably tell you to remember, is this: just act, do it. Develop your moral skills by using your own moral skills, by loving, by helping out, by doing things. That is really where you put in practice all this we're talking about. Okay? Thank you very much, guys. That's it. Let's stay here.
So I'll do the second half of the emceeing this morning. So thank you very much,
Thank you.
Mark.
Thank you. Yeah.
I'm sorry to say that Professor Rivail is trying to call to say he hates that you're talking about him for a whole hour.
Yes, that's true. Absolutely, yeah.
But I think that there's tremendous lessons to be learned by his life.
Yeah.
If we look at other religions and other prominent figures in those religions, they also pivoted in their lives. We like the word pivot these days, right?
Yeah.
So they pivot, but mostly through some kind of spiritual event.
Yeah.
Kardec pivoted because of an intellectual challenge. And he was willing to put everything that he had done up to that point at risk to find the answer to that challenge. And what I find most interesting about this is a lot of us Spiritists come to Spiritism through the same type of experience.
Yeah.
We have an intellectual pivot. We don't all have spiritual events. Many of us do. Right? Many of us experience some mediunic stuff happening to them. They're confused. They come to Spiritism. But most of us come when we realize there's so much that we don't know, and some of the answers that we see in Spiritism start to make sense to us. So thank you very much for bringing this all to us. Any questions for Marco before we move on? Really? No questions?
All right.
No question? Okay, good.
Yes. Go ahead.
I have a question actually, just one like that.
Yeah.
So you said that he started to understand that his mission was to
Yeah.
stop everything that he was doing
Yeah.
and dedicate himself to
Yes.
Spiritism.
Mm-hmm.
But then you said his mission was revealed later on.
Mm-hmm.
So when how did he realize that that was his mission? Because it's like something.
Yeah.
How would you do that? How would you realize? Oh, now I have to do this.
Yeah, so the question is, so the question is, well, he started in the early 55, 50 something, the meetings, but he didn't know his mission at that time. And then only in late 56 that there was a meeting that they officially said, this is your mission, right? And that's when we have the first books arriving right after that. So how did he know that was he had to do before? And that is a great question, because he didn't know. No one knows. We don't know, right? We know because it's embedded into our conscience when we incarnate. There's always this burning feeling inside our minds of what we need to do and what we have to do. Not always we understand exactly what it is and how we should do it, and that is part of the challenges of not remembering everything that we incarnate. But at the same time, is it a magnificent task for your capability of using your free will and developing your ability to make the right decision. So that's why the balance is interesting, because if we told you what people had to do before coming, then what was the point of knowing whether you understand what you have to do or not? And also you would be biased to do just this or that. So he didn't know, and he took as likely influenced by the spirits around him and by his own understanding that he had something that he didn't know at that time, but he had something he had to achieve and had to do. He started his route going that direction up to a point that he was ready to understand and get that message and say, well, yes, this is your mission. But by that time, he was so understanding of everything he had to do that wouldn't really bias his mind anymore, you know, like that was the mission. It's kind of similar for us, because all of us come with commitments and ideas and things that we decide to do. We not always know exactly, but we always have in our conscience that connection with that truth that we bring, that message that we need to do. And it's up to us to think, to ask for help, to, you know, try to develop that inside of us and get this north of what to do, right? And it will be helped. It's almost certain that you know, if you work on it, like, you always be helped. Like Kardec was always helped, right? But it is a difficult question. Like it's not that he knew what to do, right? He was being helped, and he had the seed inside of him, but he had to make it grow, right? And that's for all of us.
Well, thank you very much. Now that we've finished the stream part of our meeting today, I'd like to thank everybody who's watching us live or will be watching us later through the Facebook live feature. If you have any questions, just drop us a note in our Facebook page or go to our website. You have lots of information there. Thank you very much for watching. For now...